Welcome everyone to Growth Sessions. We have an awesome guest today. We have Ethan Kitching, Chief Commerce Officer from Molzi, a full-service Amazon agency based primarily in the UK, but has expanded rapidly globally. Ethan, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Ethan, what does a Chief Commercial Officer do at an agency like Molzi?
A Chief Commercial Officer at a business like Molzi, essentially sales and marketing are my main remits, but ultimately, because we're still a relatively young company, only being going for 4 years now, still very much heavily involved in the growth of our clients, things that they're looking at, whether they're looking at international expansion or whether they're looking for that. And when I say growth, I'm talking about all of the different monetary growth within their accounts. I'm still heavily involved, but definitely finding that I'm coming more and more out of the actual client work and have great teams that are able to deliver now.
Amazing. And Molzi's grown a ton. I'd love to learn, how would you describe Molzi? Like, how would you describe it to a potential client?
Molzi, as you mentioned before, full service Amazon agency. But from our point of view, in terms of when we started Molzi, looking at all of the different parts of Amazon, advertising is a huge part of that, and PPC and DSP being obviously the two parts there, but content another one. But actually even looking a bit deeper into that and getting an understanding of making sure that the products are there to surface, because we could have a great content and we could have a great advertising strategy, but actually if there's no products there to sell, then ultimately it all falls down. So working with clients to ensure that they've got sound supply chain, ensuring that they're working on that bottom line, so working with on shortages and chargebacks, and just looking at all of the different angles. So we've got kind of ex-Amazonians that are looking at kind of terms negotiations, so how they work with Amazon as a vendor. And then kind of that's our agency model. I've touched on obviously the reclaim in terms of ensuring that we've got the bottom line, but we also work as a 3P reseller as well. So I work with clients, finding it challenging working with Amazon as a vendor, or predominantly it's looking at that international expansion. We're based in UK, and Europe is a very fragmented market, being that there's a number of different VAT numbers that you need. There's all the language capabilities that are required within those different countries. So a lot of businesses won't have the infrastructure to be able to expand into those different regions. So we have the infrastructure to do that on a 3P reseller as an agency as well, but predominantly on a 3P reseller that allows them to tap into all of those different areas quickly, and they're able to sell and go to market within there. And then they can either kind of continue with that model, or they can look to bring in-house, and we can service them as an agency at that point.
That's really interesting. Most agencies don't do that. How did you know that was a model to explore? What was the pain point? At what point were you like, you know what, let's just create a 3P account and let's help our brands grow through that account if they can't do it on their own? Because I know of a lot of larger 3P, I want to call them like roll-up orgs almost, yep, that operate as a 1P vendor to a brand and then has a 3P relationship with Amazon. A lot of those exist. It's quite unique to have an agency that specifically does that. When did you know that was a good idea, and how quickly was that validated as a good idea?
Mainly, we obviously started as an agency, and how we built up the agency was with all of those capabilities. And I can understand for an agency that's mainly looking at advertising or content and advertising, that it kind of would be really alien them to think about, okay, well, let's set up a 3PL, or let's kind of look at the logistics. We were already doing that as an agency anyway. So when we were hearing the pain points of our clients and kind of things that they were looking to achieve but weren't able to achieve because they had internal blockers or they didn't have the spend to do so, we kind of looked at that as an opportunity to say, actually, do you know what? Why are we getting these guys to do that? We could do that on a bigger scale, set up the infrastructure that just allows them to tap into that without any worry. And then, kind of built that. We built it quite slowly. It's a lot more riskier than an agency model where you don't have to buy stock.
For sure, you got inventory.
Exactly. So we were kind of just dipping our toe in initially, and saw that it worked. The clients were happy with it. We were obviously over the moon with it. So we looked at that as a viable option and have doubled down on that. Ultimately, the agency's business is still kind of the big focus, but we don't want to tread on toes. We don't want to be a service that a client doesn't want. So we would never say to a client that we're working on an agency model, just because we make more margin on the 3P reseller, come to the 3P reseller, because that doesn't necessarily work for them. So it's about finding the gaps of actually what works for the clients and then kind of offering them that, because then it's a win-win both ways.
Yeah, totally. And Molzi's been around for 4 years, correct? Started with 2.
Mm-hmm.
You were one of the 2.
It was.
And it's grown a lot since then.
It has, yeah. It's grown to what is a 80-person agency now. So we started in the UK, and then we quickly we got contacts in Hong Kong and set up a business. Our second office was actually in Hong Kong, and then we expanded when we sort of foresaw Brexit was coming. So we wanted to have a European or EU foothold. So we had our Spanish office that was open, and then at the same time, kind of going later, but open at the same time, we had our Singapore and Brazil offices that were open there. And then we're looking to have our office that will be opening at the beginning of October.
That's exciting. For Hong Kong, is that focusing on Chinese sellers that sell into European and North American markets, or is that more so supporting APAC regional, like the regional domestic markets for Amazon?
A bit of both. So we're still just an Amazon agency. So in APAC, looking at Amazon Japan is amazing. There's Singapore, Australia, but the numbers don't come close to what Japan are kind of doing there. But primarily, we were looking at bringing over Chinese clients and looking at them within EU or North America. And then also with this 3P reseller model, it worked even better, because then we're tapping into the factories that have that direct to consumer business. And again, don't necessarily have the infrastructure to set up and allow them to sell direct to consumers. So that's kind of worked out later down the line. But how we started it was actually looking at the agency model and working with larger, I say larger Chinese sellers. It's actually big global brands within China that we're kind of working with, and have been very successful in kind of finding business there, because it's not something that a lot of people were tapping into at that stage.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely early days with that one. And why Spain of your European countries? Why not a market that was a little bit larger? Everyone knows that Germany is a massive market for Amazon. Why was Spain the choice?
I guess if anyone's got a German office, they could probably tell you why it's quite hard to have that as like a next stepping point, just because of the bureaucracy involved in setting that up. We looked at Spain, and obviously the contacts that we had, it looked like an ideal location. We've set that up as our trans creation hub. So brought in, there were a lot of different nationalities within the area. So we're based in San Sebastian in Spain.
Is that where the office is, in San Sebastian?
It's an incredible, and I'm a bit bitter about it because we opened it just before lockdown happened, so I still haven't been there.
Yeah, I'd love to visit. That's an excellent choice for a place to have an office in Spain.
I
That's
know,
not bad at all.
It's crazy, but yeah. So they've got there was a lot of different nationals, native speakers within there. So we started setting up our transcreation hub there. So
sorry, what's transcreation?
So when we're looking at transcreation, it's essentially translation, but looking at it a bit more deeper. So actually creating the content to ensure that it's compatible and convert highly for native speakers, but also looking at the necessary SEO keywords within those given territories as well. So going a bit deeper into kind of what's needed. Kind of the theory from our side is we work with a lot of UK-based companies, for example, and they will want to expand into Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and they'll do keyword research. They'll put a lot of work into what they're doing in the UK, but then they go into Germany and all they'll do is translate the copy and expect the same results. And kind of what we say to them is, look, all this work that you've just done for UK in terms of the English content that you put together, you need to do exactly the same for Germany, or how can you possibly expect the same results? And actually, if you haven't got that brand affinity to back up as well. So you have to do, there's more that you have to do. So when you're looking at advertising, don't just look at the same budgets. You're going to have to look at more budgets, because you're going to have to find more customers than you're used to, obviously, from the brand affinity that you have with the given territory. So when we're looking at transcreation, that's actually a huge part of what we look at, because it kind of goes against, if you do it wrong in terms of just translating, then you're not going to get the same results. So when we're looking at international expansion, we make sure that our clients have got the right transcreation there, rather than just a translation.
And why the Brazil bet?
The Brazil bet was, contact came to us with an opportunity. So it wasn't necessarily on our roadmap. It was just an opportunity that we couldn't turn down. So we've got a couple of large partners there, Ricardo, who also have a digital marketing agency in Brazil, wanted to partner up and start up entity in Brazil. Saw an opportunity for an Amazon agency, obviously Mercado Libre being the biggest marketplace there. there were a lot of agencies that were looking at that, and obviously digital marketing agencies, but no one was looking at Amazon. So it was an empty space that we thought, actually, we'll take a punt on that. And it's worked out really well. We're working with some really large clients that we could only dream of when we first started Molzi 4 years ago, and that we kind of day one in Brazil we were working with. It's been great. That's been up and running for about 6 months now. Enjoying the success of that, and they're kind of, I'm sure there'll be agencies that kind of pop up over time, but they've got in there early, and they're definitely getting the benefit of that.
Great. And then my next question on the international expansion front is very naturally, how did you know, or what gives you the idea that now is the right time to open up an office in the US?
I guess we wanted to do it since we started the agency. Got everything in place now to be able to do it. It's a very large bet, but obviously it's a large reward going into US if you can do it right. There's a huge downside as well in terms of the cost of going into market. We feel like we've got the right things in place now to be able to launch into that market. We've also got some clients already in US, so we've already got a base of clients in US. So we've kind of built that up without having a foothold within the territory. But yeah, now we're looking to build up that infrastructure within US, and we feel like we've got the right pieces in place to be able to do that.
Exciting. And so, when you're starting this company or one of the early employees of this company, I imagine you're a scrappy startup. Everyone is in the same room. You're able to collaborate really well. And now you have people all over the globe. 80-person company, 4 offices currently, a 5th on the way, maybe 6 or 7 coming in the near future. How did you create processes, and how did you create sharing all of this information across all of those offices so that you're able to operate at that same level that you were able to operate at when it was just the one office in the UK?
We'll say that I didn't create any of the processes. The scrappy startup was great, and it's not scalable. We brought in the right people that have allowed us to kind of get those processes in place. I think Chris is probably in the same ballpark as me as well, in terms of not necessarily having no
Chris, the CEO.
Chris Moll, the CEO. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, bringing in the right people that have allowed us to do that. So we've made different step changes along the way with the different people that we've brought in that have allowed us to do that. So Bridget, who was, I think she was 4th or 5th, she joined the same time as someone else. And I think that they contest with who started who first. But she came in as a relatively senior hire quite early on, kind of build that infrastructure, build up those processes. And then along the way, we've had people that keep adding to that. And then looking at the beginning of last year, Charlie Merrills, who's our CSO, came into the business, and he's very process focused. And I guess from our point of view, we grew massively during the pandemic. Obviously, e-commerce grew massively. But unless we had the process in place, we would never have been able to do it properly. Our standards would have completely dropped. We would have lost clients, and we wouldn't have continued to get new clients. So there's a lot of businesses that are like, oh, I'm sure you're doing well out of the kind of lockdowns. But actually, that was the hardest part, because trying to scale that with the processes in place, and by putting the processes in place, it allowed us to do that. So yeah, I think if it was just me and Chris to start off with, we probably wouldn't have been able to scale. There's a lot of thanks that we have to give to the people that we brought in that have put those processes in place to allow us to do what we do and work with the brands in a scalable way.
And as you think about building the team to support your brands and your clients, I'm curious to know, who are the people that interact with the clients, and how do you think about staffing up a client team? Obviously, there's a lot of different things that those folks on your team must do, given that you're a full service agency and you have the 3P account as well. If I'm client X, what should I expect from my engagement with Molzi and the touch points that I'm going to have?
Yeah, so the client teams, there's a variety of skill sets. So you will work with an account manager, of course, who will predominantly know most about everything about the board, but won't necessarily be an expert within anything. So you have a PPC exec or manager within there, a content exec or manager within there. And then we have what's called a 360 exec. So 360 exec is one of the junior roles, but it's people coming up and learning, again, all of the different areas. So learning about content and why that's important, learning about PPC and why that's important, understanding supply chain and kind of how that all fits in, forecasting and all of those different things. So they're learning kind of at that junior level. And then we have shared services as well. So again, operational specialists. We've also got data analysts, data specialists. We've also got people within the team, again, that they're helping in all of those different areas. But Yeah, the touch points from a client's point of view will be that they'll be seeing an account manager or a PPC manager or a content manager, but everything that goes on in the background, all the people that are there, but also the proprietary software and the other pieces that we have in place that has been built up to allow the teams to do their jobs properly.
Got it. And so Amazon specific agency, haven't expanded to other marketplaces yet, maybe in the future, but Amazon specific now. I'm curious to know, what are Molzi's opinions of Amazon's growth that allows you to stand out? What are the ways in which you approach growing a brand on Amazon that makes you so successful?
I guess versus the other marketplaces, it's been growing a ridiculous amount. And it's not just that it's growing at a ridiculous amount. There's a lot of marketplaces that are growing at a ridiculous rate, but the revenue's there as well. Like the revenue is so incredible that when you're working with brands, it makes sense, because when you're charging a fee, it's going to be a small percentage of what they're currently doing on Amazon. When you're looking at another marketplace, it's harder to justify that cost because the revenue isn't necessarily there, but all the work's still there. But the revenue is not necessarily there. So again, it's making sense of that. We found that as well going into the US. So when we're working with clients in the US, it just makes more sense for them to work with us, because actually looking at the revenue that they're doing on Amazon, we fit in quite nicely as a smaller percentage, rather than, as I said, if we're working in a country like Spain, for example, it's a bit more of a harder justification because of the cost is going to be higher as a percentage than it would be in one of these bigger countries. So just the sheer revenue and the volume and opportunity on Amazon kind of allows for an agency to kind of fit within there.
Got it. And so why do brands come to you? What makes you unique?
So what we feel makes us unique is that we're not afraid of challenging our clients. So when we're working with clients and they're kind of coming to us with, look, we want to work with an agency, these are our KPIs. We kind of ask the question of, why are those your KPIs? So, in a lot of cases, brands will come to us and say, okay, well, we need to hit a ROAS of X, and it'll be a percentage that they want to grow their ROAS. And you try and take them back and say, actually, why are you growing your ROAS? You want to grow your ROAS to increase your sales. If you're growing your ROAS, that's actually going to have a detriment on the growth of your sales, because all you're going to be doing is cannibalizing, and therefore the whole reason that you were advertising in the first place is kind of lost at that point. So I think why brands work with us and why they choose us and it works well and it's scalable is that we challenge them from day one, and we're not scared to challenge them from day one. And if it's to the detriment of not winning the business, then okay. But actually, if we end up taking a brand with the KPIs that they set that we don't necessarily agree with, then it's going to be a disaster when we work with them anyway. So yeah, I think that's kind of what they'll see when working with us. That, as annoying as it may be sometimes, we will challenge them, as long as we are all clear in terms of what that KPI is, and if it's for growth, then great, let's work on that together. But let's set the right KPIs that allow for that growth to happen, not ones that are kind of driven because they're buzzwords or because that's kind of what everyone's been doing over that time, over a time period.
So let's say it's incremental total sales growth. I'm the client. That's what I want. Incremental total sales growth. What's next? What's Molzi going to do to what are the steps that you're going to take for that new client to get incremental total sales growth?
So first of all, we'll start looking at what's been working and look at your top 20%, for example. So look at the top 20% of your range, understand what's been working over that time, and kind of look at the inefficiencies within that top 20% as a kind of first off. That would be the low hanging fruit.
What does that mean, the top 20% of my range? Top 20% of what exactly?
So top 20% sellers of your range. We'd start doubling down in terms of looking at the data and getting understanding of what the inefficiencies are within there. And it could be the fact that you haven't got the right advertising strategy. It could be that the content's not in the right place. It could be that they're not procuring as many products as you would like them to. It could be that the ASINs have crapped out and there's a problem with kind of the terms that you set or the pricing that you've set, or there's a whole manner of things. But that would be kind of where we drill into initially. And then it's a case of, okay, well, what do you do with that torso and then tail at the later ends? But it's understanding the priorities and taking them as priorities. And then obviously there's MPD and ensuring that you're launching MPD correctly.
NPD is
that's a new product development, new product launches. So when they are bringing in a new product, Amazon can be quite slow with a new product based on obviously the fact that they won't have reviews, based on the fact that they've got no relevancy. So there's a whole host of things that you can look at when looking to launch, but ultimately getting all those steps in the right place is what you need to do. So if you're looking at a new product launch, for example, and you tell your agency, okay, well, we're launching a product and we're launching it next week, then you're not setting anyone up for success there. So working with brands that let us know, okay, in 3 months' time, we've got this product that we're launching, or 4 months or 5 months' time, and getting a plan ahead of that. So ensuring you've got the right content, ensuring you've got the right plan in place for Vine, perhaps, the right advertising budget. Maybe it's graphic design that needs to be done based on the fact that you don't necessarily have the right imagery. There's a number of different things you need to look at, and that will obviously allow for success of that product. So yeah, it's just working with the client there and making sure that you're completely aligned. As I said, there's a whole host of things that will allow for that growth, but understanding that the priorities need to kind of work in order of what ensures that you capitalize on that and try to capitalize on that as soon as possible, so everyone's happier sooner rather than later.
Does Molzi have a perspective on an optimal advertising strategy for a new product?
It's so dependent. It's so dependent on kind of the category that it's within, where the brand is. You know, if it's a challenger brand, then they're not going to necessarily have that brand affinity. So you're just going to have a different.
Let's say I'm a challenger brand launching I'm a sparkling water brand launching a new matcha line, matcha sparkling water. I don't even know if that can exist. And I want to aggressively grow. I think matcha's hot. I think it's underserved in the market. I see that it's a rising search term on Amazon, all things matcha. What would be my advertising strategy?
Well, first of all, I congratulate you on finding that there's a search trend that's going in the right direction. A lot of clients aren't doing that ahead of time. But yeah, no, anyway, so I think the point is understanding, okay, what's that ceiling on Amazon at the moment? What does success look like? So, okay, what are number one achieving in terms of sales? What are number two achieving in sales? And then all the way down to the kind of top 10.
Against, are you referring to how are you getting that data of how much that person's achieving in sales? Are you proprietary data or?
No, there's a whole host of 3P software that we'll be looking at to kind of gauge that and get a good enough reading of what that could look like. So we'll then take that as a category, understand the category, do a category analysis of what that looks like. And then it's a case of, okay, well, let's look at the search terms. What are the search terms getting? Is it something that again, as you said, the search trend's going up? What does that look like? What does that look like in comparison to a bit more of a generic search term, to understand again what the size of the prize is there? And then also, if it's not, then okay, well, what does that look like outside of Amazon? So what's the Google search term? Okay, it might be that Amazon aren't getting at the moment, but okay, actually you need to find your customers outside of Amazon at that point. So then it's a case of, okay, well, what's your programmatic? It might be a Google strategy that you have. It might be a social strategy that you have. So it's looking into all of these different pieces and then working out what that strategy is based on all of those different data points, and then coming up with a budget. And that might not necessarily be just a PPC budget. That might be a DSP budget. That might be a budget that you use on social, a number of different things. And that's ultimately what we would look at, because we need to align on what success looks like. If a client says to us, look, we want to be selling 1 million a month of this matcha, then I'd be like, okay, well, what's the number one doing? The number one selling 100,000 a month. Where are we going to get that extra 900,000 from if it's not necessarily on Amazon already? And just aligning that to make sure that everyone's aware of what success should look like within the given territory, because it's obviously going to be different as well. So if you're looking to launch in the US, it's going to be very different to if you're launching in the UK. But you need to understand and need to align on what success looks like. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a good relationship for either party.
Any fun client stories that you can share of wins that you've grown a great deal?
Probably there's some from the scrappy side. So when we were looking at, when we first started, when it was just myself and Chris and trying to do everything at that point, there was brands that put their faith in us at a very early stage. And some of them weren't on Amazon at all. And we had to, at the very initial stage, actually sell Amazon to them rather than even sell us working with them. So we were kind of working with them on, okay, well, this is why you should be on Amazon, not even this is why you should work with Molzi on Amazon. So they were doing zero. And we would work with them in terms of figuring out, okay, well, what range should we be launching on Amazon? Even looking at the product sizes to let them know, okay, well, these products won't work on Amazon because of the price point, and if you want it to be profitable, if you want to scale it. And then also it's a case of, okay, vendor versus seller and all those different things. So these were the very basics and kind of building it up from scratch, working with businesses like that. And then you kind of grow them. We grew them to a phenomenal amount when the CEO would call me quite regularly, and I could not believe the amount of sales that we're getting. And I was like, yeah, I told you this from the very beginning that we would do that. But it's good that we kind of allowed that. And we're still working with some of the clients that we worked with from day one. So from very early stages, because we've been able to kind of scale them that, from their point of view, like we've got a great relationship with them still. And then obviously as we've grown and evolved and working with larger clients, we're still seeing phenomenal results from that as well. So we've worked with one of the largest FMCG clients that we were working with at the beginning of last year, and this was pre-pandemic, and then worked with them throughout the pandemic. Of course, they saw a huge increase that they weren't expecting or weren't anticipating, which led to its own host of issues, and they weren't advertising, they weren't content related. There was no issue about driving traffic. There was no issue on that. It was about availability. So then you start working with them on, okay, how do we start ensuring that we've got availability? How do we ensure that we've got a scalable advertising strategy in place? Because it's not going to work just throwing more money at it, because all you're going to do is increase the sales velocity and go out of stock quicker. So working on the different lines, and then working with what they have in stock and what they don't have in stock, and running with that over time to ensure that they continued selling at that high velocity, but just with a different array of products and that they would have been used to. So yeah, again, that's kind of looking at all of the different parts of Amazon. It's not just looking at the content and advertising. It's understanding that stock has to come first. You need to have stock to sell to allow for all the other strategies to kind of work together.
Has that conversation with clients changed? The one where the why Amazon conversation, and it's not an if, it's a when and how now?
Yeah, it's definitely changed, definitely shifted. It's funny because when we're working with companies in different countries, the conversations are different. So when we're working with someone in Brazil, for example, they're saying, well, why would I work with Amazon? I'm working with Mercado Libre, and that's where the e-commerce is. So we're having those conversations again in Brazil, but certainly in UK, US, there's not a conversation of why Amazon. It's a case of how do I work with Amazon? I've been working on 1P all this time. It's not scalable. Or I want to go to 3P, but I don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place. Or, we've been on Amazon for a number of years, but we just haven't been able to do anything with it. They're the sort of conversations that we're having now, not a case of selling Amazon.
And as Amazon has evolved across all of these brands, I'm sure the org chart that you interact with at Amazon has changed as well. Can you speak to where does Amazon sit right now? How has that evolved and what you've seen from your clients? Who's responsible for the Amazon P&L at large global brand X? How does that vary at the local level and at the global level? And how does Molzi help ensure that the right stakeholders are in the room so that you can align on those KPIs?
That's a great question, and it's something that's changed quite rapidly over the last year and a half. So when we were working with larger companies, they would have a national account manager that was looking at Amazon, but as part of their remit. So they'd be looking at Amazon as well as Tesco, Argos, and all the rest. That has evolved with a lot of different brands, and actually even some brands have got the kind of Amazon Center of Excellence built up, and you can see them doubling down on their efforts there, which is obviously great. It's really different depending on the type of client that we're talking to. But usually what's best is, from our point of view, is when we're working with a team that understand Amazon better. So when we're working with clients, a lot of what we do is ensuring that we're training up the backroom staff as well, to make sure that they're completely aligned as to why they need to do certain things. So when we're working with the admin team in terms of accepting POs, why is it important to accept POs on time? Why is it important to label goods the way that they need to be labeled? Even the very basic things are good to kind of talk to the different brands about. It's still, I couldn't tell you one role that was, other than like an Amazon account manager, I can't tell you one role that is specifically the Amazon point of contact, because there can be head of e-commerce, it can be an e-commerce manager, it can be an Amazon account manager, it can still be a national account manager. it's a number of different people that we're talking to that own the Amazon P&L. So yeah, that is changing, but it hasn't completely changed. It's not that everyone's got a kind of Amazon center of excellence. There's a few that do, but I'm sure a lot more will as the revenue starts heading that way. But then also, there's a lot of brands that are saying, Amazon's already not a profitable account for me. So how can I invest more into it? How can I look to scale that with the teams that we're kind of bringing in? And that's something that we help them with as well.
Surely they only complain about that before they work with Molzi and not after the fact.
Of course.
And so do you see differences at like we spoke about where Molzi's offices sit globally? And obviously Brazil, as an example, is a significantly more emerging market than something like the UK, which is more mature. Do you see variances in how those teams approach Amazon depending on the market?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, with Brazil, it's still the question of why Amazon at that point. We're having those conversations with them in terms of why Amazon, but it's also not necessarily why Amazon from a retail point of view, but it's also a case of from an advertising space point of view. So we talk to non-endemic clients out in Brazil and talk to them about kind of the inventory that Amazon have versus Google and Facebook and kind of the differences of that as well. And just working with them to get a better understanding and also testing things. So it's important to work with brands, especially if they're not believers. Just say, look, just give me a little budget. Like, just let me show you, because I can give you a case study after case study, but all we need is a little budget just to show you what is capable within Amazon, and you'll be astonished in terms of the kind of numbers that you can get with something that you don't feel like is important. So we've been quite successful in trying to kind of working with clients on a very small base initially and just testing things and kind of showing, look, this is on your account. This isn't even me coming to you with a case study that you can or cannot believe. This is your account that you can see exactly what's happening.
How do you quantify little when you talk to a brand? Where does that number come from? Is it a arbitrarily $10,000 a month, a couple $1,000s a month? Is it X percent of sales? Where do you get that little test and learn experimentation budget from?
So it's going to be relative to the market. A little in Brazil is going to be much smaller than a little in UK and very much smaller than a little in US. There's no set value, but it's understanding where your clients are at currently and kind of working within those parameters to say, look, these are the clients that we're working with. This is not letting them know what they're spending, but kind of giving them an inkling of what the spend should be. And then kind of working down from there and saying, what budget could we look to use to kind of have this test and learn approach that allows you to talk upwards and kind of sell Amazon with us, because ultimately they want more ways of being able to sell product. They don't want to be pigeonholed into. So if we're talking about Brazil, for example, they don't want to just be thinking about Mercado Libre. Amazon's growing at a phenomenal rate in Brazil, but it's just the revenue isn't necessarily there. How can you sell a marketplace that doesn't necessarily have the revenue there? It's taking them on that journey and getting them to understand this is what you can achieve just with even a smaller budget.
Lovely. We like to end these sessions with one question. And it's if you were to make one prediction for e-commerce advertising, or in the case of Molzi, Amazon advertising for the next year, what would that prediction be?
So for Amazon advertising, I think they're going super aggressive, and not just aggressive within the territories that they have at the moment, but there's going to be a lot more that they do outside of the territories that they're looking at, and even outside of the territories that they have retail space within. So looking kind of further afield and working with inventory that's kind of outside of the main markets that they're working within a marketplace way. So one, they'll be majorly aggressive there. I think also the same way that Google and Facebook embraced agencies quite quickly, Amazon are embracing agencies now. They didn't necessarily as much at the beginning. And I think they'll be embracing agencies to bring more and more spend across the way and be a bit more aggressive in terms of wanting to kind of win that triopoly that they're in. That's where they make a huge amount of margin, but also the advertising, there's still so much upside. So that's where they're going to go aggressively. And then the more and more brands that buy into that, again, it's just going to keep feeding into that. It's a super exciting space to be within. I'm looking forward to the next year and so on within the Amazon advertising space.
Sounds like many more offices for Molzi.
I mean, if we
The
can,
world domination continues.
if we can better San Sebastian and Sao Paulo, I'd be very surprised. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that for certain.
I'm surprised after Saint Sebastian that you wouldn't go for Rio for the Brazil office and stick to the beach, maybe Miami for US, at least a consistent theme there.
Hey, Miami's still on the cards. Let's see.
Okay. Let's meet in Miami in 2022. Ethan, thanks so much. This was awesome. If anyone's interested, where can people hit up you and learn more about Molzi?
The website is as simple as it could be, mosey.com. And if you want to get in contact with me on LinkedIn, it's Ethan Kitching, or my email is ethan@molzi.com.
All right. Amazing. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
This is Growth Sessions. Please make sure to subscribe to listen to more episodes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.